Welcome everybody. This is George Matos. I'm the principal here at Blue Marble 3D. We're going to be getting started. I have Jennifer O'Connor here with me as well. She's the Director of Digital Artists at Blue Marble 3D. And then I have Brian Trout from BOXX Technologies. He's the Technical Solutions Manager. So the layout for today basically is we're going to kind of do this a little different because we don't know who actually knows about Iray, who doesn't know about Iray. So we're going to talk about kind of the basics of Iray, similar to kind of what we did about a year ago. And then we're going to talk about specific things as to what's new with Iray and Max Design 2014. And then we're going to go over, at the end, we'll go over some hardware and some benchmarking tests that we did here at Blue Marble 3D. Now, the phones are going to stay muted to keep this nice and clean because we are recording the webcast. So sometime next week we hope to have it posted online, either on the BOXX YouTube channel or ours or both. And there'll be an email from BOXX letting you guys know. So Q&As can come through via chat, and then we will respond to those at the end of the session. So the goal, so that everybody knows, is basically we're going to do about a session of 45 minutes kind of talking about everything, and then we will respond to questions from the chat for the last 15 minutes or so. So this is kind of the layout for the agenda. Another thing we wanted to add in here, because we know a lot of people still use Mental Ray. It's not still a product. We use it here for doing certain things. So Jenny wants to actually just highlight a couple things specific to Mental Ray and Max 2014. And then as you guys saw in the flyer that was put out for Iray as far as what the latest features are, we're going to kind of go over a couple things here: Caustic sampler, architectural sampler, motion blur, layered materials, global displacement, using light portals and render elements. And then the discussion about hardware Kepler, benchmarking results, and then, as we said, Q&A. So Iray, what is it? Again, this will be kind of for the people that don't really know about it, so some basic stuff. It's the world's first interactive photorealistic rendering solution developed by the NVIDIA Advanced Rendering Center. It's available in 3ds Max and 3ds Max Design out of the box. It achieves a high level of performance, taking full advantage of the NVIDIA CUDA programming model. So, and this is a rendering that we did. And Blue Marble 3D, just so everybody understands too, we are a new division of Chipman Design Architecture that spawned off, and basically we do a lot of things. And the first take on this was actually Iray, and this was an image we did into Iray. This was our very first Iray rendering that we did for a client of ours, and they basically, asked us to come in here and do some stuff as far as their kitchen goes, putting some windows in and looking at Iray. It was in the early stages of development, and we decided to try it. And if we would have used Mental Ray, it would have taken a lot longer. It would not have been as crisp as this. So once we turned this over to them and they showed their contractors, all their consultants, everybody was wowed by it, and it was a success. And ever since then, we're about 95% Iray only here. And then here's a couple of renderings that we've done. This is the latest rendering we did of a restaurant here in Chicago, Ditka's Restaurant. So everything you're seeing here is from Iray. The only thing that are photos are the photos that you're seeing in the frame. So everything else is digitally recreated. A couple other samples. The first one was actually no architectural materials. And then the second one here is architectural with caustics. So if we'll flip back and forth here. If you guys take a look at the ceiling, you can kind of see a little bit of lighting difference. Yeah, and Jenny's going to be going over what that is with the caustics and the architectural. This was another client of ours, Brunswick Bowling, all Iray again. They had problems with previous people as far as how to represent their ideas, and they weren't sure, if renderings were the right way to go. But once we started working with them and showed them the Iray technology and how we could do it, this was a very big part of the design process, and things evolved immensely because of the renderings. just another shot for Iray, just looking down the bowling lanes. I think we probably have, if I remember correctly, 3 gigs worth of renderings for this client, just because of all the iterations that we went through. Interior of the restaurant, basically, for Brunswick as well. So again, Iray lighting levels, it's just no fuss, no muss is the way I kind of equate it. These were some samples that NVIDIA had given me, just to, again, show something different than architectural. So all Iray. Another sample using translucent, so that we'll Jenny's going to talk about this here in a couple minutes. Another rendering, this is actually done by Delta Tracing. They do a lot of Iray as well. And the basics. So again, this is you're going to see some slides that were similar to last year, but we're going to try to take into account, we don't know who's on the phone, so we want to go over the basics, and then we're going to go into the what's new on everything. So I'm going to turn it over to Jenny and let her take it from here.
Hello, welcome. I am going to actually switch over to 3D Studio Max and just show you within the UI what these are. But we're going to talk about the general settings in Iray, basically our workflow. The stated purpose of this webinar is to talk about what's new in Iray. We're going to talk a little bit about what's new in Mental Ray, just cover it in brief. George and I are doing a presentation at Autodesk University in December, so this is kind of a mini version of what's going to be going on there. I can introduce myself real quickly too. George mentioned I'm the director of digital artists here at Blue Marble 3D. I am also the author of a book called Mastering Mental Ray, which is available everywhere. Doesn't cover Iray and GPU, so this is kind of an extension of that. And I am working on, as part of the Autodesk University presentation, some bonus chapters for that that'll cover Iray and some of the new things with Mental Ray, but that's coming in the future months. So, like I said, I'm going to switch over to Max and talk about these rather than showing slides at the moment. So let me minimize that. We're rather informal here. And okay. So as far as what's new, in Max 2014, in Mental Ray, I had lots of copies of Max open, but not the one that I needed. So let me switch this back over to Mental Ray. Okay. A couple specific things that you should be aware of with Mental Ray. If you look at the renderer settings, if you start up a new scene with Mental Ray in Max 2014, there's a drop-down now for sampling mode, and it comes up as Unified Ray Traced Recommended. If you open up an old scene, it's going to come up with the previous classic ray traced settings, and then you also have rasterized scanline as an option. But we'll talk about the Unified Ray Traced for a moment. Rather than settings for minimum and maximum that you had in the past, you now have a quality setting right there, and then a minimum and maximum range for the sampling or subsampling of the pixels that are going to happen. So value of 1 for minimum means that a pixel is going to be a sample. A maximum of 128 means it's going to subdivide that up to 128 times. And this is the range that it works. Oftentimes with the previous settings, classic ray trace, you might have minimum of 1/4 as the default, which means a group of 4 pixels was a sample. Maximum of 4 means that we have perhaps down to a 1/4 pixel as a sample. So these have much higher range, up to 128. But this is really the number that's going to drive your render time and your overall quality as the option says. So we open up the rendered frame window. You got your image precision slider, and basically in the middle is a pretty good number. The quality setting, I believe, goes up to 20. And oftentimes, just because something goes up to a number doesn't mean that it's practical or something that is usable in any way. So for me and the work we've done with mental ray so far, going up to the medium setting has worked pretty well for everything that we've done. Don't go up to the very high unless you understand what it's going to do for you, and you really need that. So keep that somewhere in the middle. For a lot of things, even below a quality of 1.0 is sufficient. I'm going to switch over to my notes here. So with unified ray tracing, contoured rendering is incompatible with unified, and render to texture is incompatible with unified. So beware of that. But generally it does a better job with motion blur, depth of field, other things, and it's definitely worth a try. Also new in 2014 are string options. So in the past you had to create a Mac script and set it up so that you could access the mental ray and set the options, clear options, and so on. And here all you have to do is just add the options. And one that you might be interested in is progressive, and then on. And when you do that, instead of doing bucket rendering, it actually renders the whole image progressively. So it's a nice feature. And having the string options there certainly simplifies things greatly. And it also ensures that when you send things out to Backburner that it's where you need it to be. It doesn't have to try to find a script on the network. So we do also, under state sets, in state sets, you can right-click, add a scripted state, and add those within here too. But you do have to do a complete Mac script, not just do progressive on. One other thing that's new in Mental Ray under Global Illumination, you now have image-based lighting. So in the past, to do image-based lighting, basically you had your background environment. You also had to add a skylight and add the environment into that and do it manually. And the results weren't the greatest. Now they have a very nice image-based lighting built into our global illumination. It's not indirect illumination. It says GI, and you can adjust the quality and the shadow mode, so faster, transparent with that. Otherwise, for the most part, things are very similar. And for the Autodesk University, we'll have more examples of the mental ray in addition to the Iray for that, but we don't have that today. So skylight illumination, string options, I mentioned unified ray tracing. One thing that you'll also see in Max 2014 is that if mental ray crashes, it actually will not ideally crash 3D Studio Max. If you look at the render message window, it should actually pop up if you do get an error. But in the render message window, that's 2013, get rid of that. Same window, but it'll say in here that mental ray has crashed and for what reason. It doesn't happen often, but it can happen. You won't be able to continue to render in mental ray. You'll have to restart Max to get it to work again, but at least it doesn't take Max down. You can still save your scene, so that's certainly a bonus for everyone. General in 3D Studio Max, there's a couple things that Autodesk lists as new features in 2014 that actually affect rendering, so I want to talk about that real quick. Expand that out. Ease of use. One thing that I think most people are going to like is that the auto backup can be interrupted. So you'll see in the bottom when it goes in auto back, you can press escape. It's not a mental ray feature, but I certainly like that. Let's go down here. Under environments, when you create an environment map, it automatically comes in as spherical. In the past, it came in as just a screen mapped. So if I go to environment, click there, go to bitmap, and find an HDRI spherical map, for instance. Let's go find one. on our network. So HDRs. This is also different, so before I move forward, I'll talk about this too. In the bitmap selection, you'll notice that there's fewer options here under Gamma. There's automatic, recommended, and then there's override. They've tried to streamline the way that Gamma works within 3D Studio Max. And Gamma is an adjustment that's either added or subtracted to an image to brighten or darken it. It's based on a curve. So it's not just a simple brighten darken. It actually brightens, for display. It brightens more in the mid-range and less on the either end. And that mimics the way that the human eye works. Televisions automatically do a gamma value of 2.2, for instance. If you take a photograph with a digital camera, maybe adding a gamma of 1.8 to 2.2, depending on the camera, 1.8 is pretty typical. Well, 3D Studio Max needs to take that brightening out, and we had an additional option in here for the control, but they're trying to automate that more so that Max is smarter about how that works. For an HDR image, you want to make sure that it's 1.0, and it should be doing that with that anyways, but that is a change. So if we click Open with an HDR image, real pixels and default exposures, desirable, and if I bring that into our material editor, let's drag that over there, you'll see that this is set to spherical environment. There are also other times where if you change settings within Max, it would switch this back to screen instead of spherical. So that's just a little bonus for all of us. We talked about rendering. We're going to get to Iray in just a second. The viewport now supports DirectX 11. It is much faster. So if you have performance issues with older copies of Max, you might want to look at that as an upgrade. Every time they come out with a new version, they definitely spend a lot of time on nitrous to get that to work better. Under the help file, I do want to point out one thing. They do have a Mental Ray help file. So if we come under Help and Autodesk 3ds Max Help, Help is online. You can download it for local use if you need to. And let's go back to that. And I can't get my mouse. There we go. If you look at like the rendering improvements, they talk about the things that I just talked about here. If we go to I think string row, this options, there are links to the Mental Ray help online, and it comes up with a 404 error. And I've talked about that with Autodesk. And if you right-click, copy the shortcut, paste it in there, you can actually kind of come back to there and get to the actual Mental Ray help. So just manually insert that and go back to that. You can find more about Mental Ray in specific. Okay, so that's Mental Ray, 3D Studio Max in general. Go back to Iray. So there's actually a few things that didn't make it onto our list of things to talk about. There are new maps supported in Max 2014 in Iray. Actually, since Max 2012, things have been added continuously. So checker map, color correction map, dent map, gradient marble, ocean shader, Perlin marble, speckle, substance map, which we'll talk about briefly if we get some time. Tiles was supported pretty quickly, but if you tried Iray when it first came out, there's a lot of things that were just not available yet. So in architecture, you got to have your tiles map. Some things like wood, procedural maps, we don't use a lot of, but they are there now for you and available. Let's take a look at the Iray settings. So when you are using Iray, we're going to switch from Mental Ray to Iray. You do want to use your material editor as Mental Ray and not Iray unless you have a specific reason to switch it over to Iray. And the reason is it just takes too long for it to render the thumbnails. If it's a Mental Ray material, it'll render just fine in the viewport, and it should match pretty closely to what your rendering is going to be. We're going to talk about a new Iray material, and that might be the only reason that you would need to switch that to Iray. So, very, very simple settings. You've really only got 3 settings that you generally need to worry about as far as the quality of the image that you're going to produce. So the default is time, set to 1 minute. We never really use time unless we have a deadline that we're trying to hit. This is a great feature if you know you need to be done by noon and you've got to get that image out, and you got 60 minutes, and it'll just run until 60 minutes and then save your image out. So under those circumstances, or you just want to do a quick thing and you don't care about the overall quality, send it out with 1 minute or whatever. Iterations is what we generally use to control our quality, and the reason for that is we've got a number of different machines on our network which have different graphics cards, different quantities of graphics cards, different series of graphics cards between the older Quadro Teslas and the newer Kepler cards. So this ensures that no matter what is inside that machine, it's going to render to the quality that we need. And for an outdoor scene, maybe 1,500 iterations would be appropriate. Interior, it depends on the content of that scene, what you might need, but 3,000, 5,000 is pretty typical. In some older versions of Iray, there's been scenes where we've set it to 10,000, 15,000 or more, just to try to reduce the noise as much as possible. The newer versions of Iray does a much better job per iteration of working on your image. So you don't need extreme high numbers for the iterations. And certainly unlimited, you can just let it run till you come back in the morning and it does whatever it can get done. So one change in 2014 is that if you've got it set to unlimited and you render an image, it shows you the number of iterations in the progress dialog. So if you watch it, you can gauge that, well, this looks pretty nice. You can see what the iterations value happens to be, and when you send it to the network, maybe set that number to whatever your iteration value was. In the render message window, you could also right-click and show information in progress messages, and if you watch this, you'll also see the iterations as they go by. New for Max 2014, under Advanced Parameters, we have an architectural sampler and a caustics sampler. And the architectural sampler changes the underlying way that Max is shooting rays and calculating how the surfaces all work. And it does produce much nicer images for complex architectural interior type of scenes. You're not going to see much of an advantage if you're doing an outdoor scene, an HDRI lit image-based lighting product demo scene kind of thing. So it is mostly for architectural interiors. So let's take a look at some samples we had. There. So George showed the Ditkas a little bit there. So we go to this image here is with architectural and caustics. Caustics, there's no real direct lights in here, so the caustics really aren't doing much. If we had some more point lights, you'd probably see some caustics coming off the glass. So caustics for this one wasn't really a requirement, but we wanted to see what it looked like. So this is with architectural, and this image is without. And it's subtle, but you'll see some differences in here. You'll see some differences over here. It's actually, if we go back to the architectural, a little more contrast, a little less washed out in there, a little bit different up in there for the reflections. I think that's where you see most of it. So a lot of most of the work we do is probably interiors similar to this, and the architectural option makes a big difference just in the quality and the feel of the scene. Another one, which is related to the book, I wanted to show kind of how Iray looked in the past with that image. And this next one is with the architectural. And you'll actually see that energy is being transported off of here up into there. You're getting some more reflections. And then this is with caustic. So not a real big benefit with caustic. It's a little brighter through here, so we might be getting some more energy being reflected off of that. This is primarily lit through the windows in this scene. So there's another big advantage with Iray. Basically, every surface is a source of illumination. If you've got a light source, once that strikes a surface, that surface is a source of illumination. And the way Iray works, we can do image-based lighting, or not image-based lighting, but material-based lighting on everything, and actually light your scene just through objects that are glowing. You know, it really doesn't care. The other big advantage with Iray is that you can have as many lights as you want. We'll talk about that in a moment with some of these scenes like Brunswick, which had close to 2,000 lights between all the different rooms of that area. So with architectural, definitely some better illumination. If you look over here, you know, there's not a lot more that's getting back there. It's subtle, but it's definitely an improvement, at least with that scene. So I've been playing with some things, trying to work out my demos for that. With the architectural option, you may need more iterations. So if you had a scene without architectural that was at 3,000, you might want to boost that up to 5,000 just to get the quality out of it. For most of our projects too, if we need something that's going to be 1920 by 1080, we'll double it. So we'll do a 4K image instead of a 2K image, and then reduce it to try to blend the pixels better. If you do that, then you can probably back this off quite a bit. Not down to 1,000, but there are noise filters that you can use in Photoshop to try to improve and smooth the image. Noise is not as big of an issue as it was early on with Iray, but still, just for quality purposes, we tend to render large and then reduce, and it eliminates our issues there. Caustic sampler. So unless you're doing a still life where you really need to be up close and personal with caustics, you know, definitely make a decision before you turn it on whether you really need it or not. So this is an example, just simple torus, and I don't remember if that's a point light or it's a very small light to try to focus the illumination coming through. And it does a phenomenal job. You do not get that by default with Iray without the caustics. And 2013 and before, you didn't have that caustics option. It did do some things. So there's no caustics. That's basically what you got before, and you know, you've got a little bit of the shadow that's being produced. That's pretty much it. The Iray layered material, the new Iray material, supports dispersion, and with curved materials, it's not a real great option, but it can affect some of the transparent materials in there. But as far as caustics are concerned, it does a brilliant job. It doesn't add a huge amount to the render time compared to adding caustics inside Mental Ray, but it does have a bit of a price to it time-wise. So do a trial, make sure that it's needed for that particular scene, and enable it if you need it. So it looks great. Something that was new in 2013, if we look at 2013 and the user interface there for Iray, we've got no architectural or caustics. We do have displacement. We'll talk about that. We do have motion blur early on. Iray didn't support motion blur, so it is available in 2013. So we'll switch over to 2014. And this is actually a demo scene that came with Max Release 9 back in the day, and a little helicopter. And we'll talk about the motion blur settings for that. Okay, so Iray settings, motion blur, enable. It's basically the same thing you have with mental ray. You can blur all objects. If that's turned off, you can actually go to the object properties and control the motion blur here. So if you don't want it to be enabled, you can have it only work on certain objects. Shutter duration, offset, so forth is all the same as mental ray. Motion segments, if you have something that's rotating like this, you need to have the motion segments up. I think the default is 1, and the default for this is 8, so iterations per motion step. I'm also going to jump ahead to hardware resources. On this machine, we've got 7 GPUs, Quadro 6000 used by Windows. I'm going to turn that one off and probably back this down to 6. Newer versions of Iray do a very good job at utilizing the CPU. Early on with Iray, it was an issue that if you had CPUs enabled, it actually slowed things down. That's not an issue that I'm aware of, either in our experience, and I believe that was taken care of with mental images. So feel free to use that. There is a little bit of a performance degradation on whatever is being utilized for Windows, just so that you can still interact with the machine. It does tend to use up all the resources that you have, but if you turn that off, then we should be able to click render and see how that works real quick. The motion blur is not free as far as the, is that turned off? Hang on. Enable, blur all objects, sorry. Playing with settings. Motion blur is not free. It does have some overhead, but I think it's much quicker than what you're going to get out of mental ray. And I should have set that to single frame, but we can go back to our image here. Let me do that. Just to explain a little bit about what those settings are and what you might need to adjust if you're working on a scene. If you have something that's moving linearly, car going down a street, the default settings are fine. But if you have something that's rotational like this, you're going to end up with it going from point A to point B in a straight line. And you'll need to come over to the motion blur settings, increase the motion segments, depending on how curved you want that to be. And in this particular example, that last image rendered in 7 seconds. Pretty quick for a demo. And increasing the motion segments gives us a nice curved motion blur, and it was the same amount of time, so a little extra processing there. You can also do depth of field and displacement with Iray, and this is an old classic mental ray demo scene, again I pulled that from Max 2009, or Release 9 examples, and it's just a simple arc and design. We've got a bitmap that goes into the displacement. And pretty straightforward from there. The settings for displacement are actually the same as what you have in mental ray. So displacement parameters, edge length, view, smoothing, and so on. And here's a couple images to show the difference between the two. So this is displacement in mental ray. Materials are a little bit different, but it does just as good a job creating the displacement throughout the scene. Okay. Something new for Max 2014 is the mental ray sky portals. And going back to that bath scene, with mental ray, you really needed to have mental ray sky portals on the windows to bring in illumination, to even out the illumination. Final gather, you'd end up with a very bad image. Mental ray sky portals are supported by Iray. There's not a lot of additional overhead that's generated by adding those, and it's really only a clue to the renderer that there's a portal to the outside. And it's really only necessary on rather small portals. So in this scene here, in my tests, adding a mental ray sky portal didn't add anything to the illumination of the scene. So a much smaller opening would make a difference in that case. So in this kitchen image, adding the mental ray sky portals, one of the big purposes behind this scene was they were adding these windows, and they wanted to see the illumination in there. So you know, the amount of light coming through there was a big deal. With these smaller windows, it did make some difference in Iray in the overall illumination, but unfortunately my images didn't render right last night, so I don't have that to show. But you know, again, just a smaller portal would make the difference in that. Max early on, or Iray early on, didn't support the alpha channel in images, and it does support that now. So one of our items here was to talk about render elements. It actually doesn't support render elements per se. There's no render elements tab there, but if you do save an image with alpha, then you will get that. Iray has a special Iray-only material that you can download from their website. And let me go on here. I have the little link here. It's actually the other one. At the Iray developers blog. So it's blog.irayrender.com. Definitely, if you're interested in Iray, go there, take a look at everything that they have. Some of the things are experimental. One of the things we hope to get in Max is this heat map display. It's not available for us, but it is something that's within there. And if you look around it here, I had it up here. There it is. Iray plugin for 3ds Max. So Max 2013, Max 2014, download the zip. There's an outstanding PDF. They did a terrific job documenting the material and all the different options on it. So it's 35 pages of images and information that you really need to just sit down and spend some time working through to understand the different options, how adjusting them affects them, turning on different things. So I'm not going to, certainly, I don't have time to go through every option on there, but we'll take a look at what the material is and kind of give you just an overview why you might want to use it. So you have to install a plugin. Once you download it, you have to put it into the correct folders. This is how it comes. It's got the PDF. It tells you where to put them. On Max Design 2014, there's a material DLT that goes into the plugins, and then there's an NVIDIA folder that has include and shaders. So pretty straightforward, just copy it in there, and it becomes available to you within the material editor. You may have to turn on Show Incompatible in 2013, but 2014 it should show up. So drag in the Iray material. It is a layered material. Double-click on that. There are a number of useful templates for materials, and I thought I had my, here it is. Great place to start as far as where to go with the material. A number of car paint materials, diamond, different types of glass, frosted, some with volumetric effects with a little bit of a green tint to them. Brilliant looking frosted glass, velvety effects, leather jade. It doesn't replace the need for the Arc & Design. Arc & Design works just fine. There's a number of settings within the Arc & Design that don't do anything, like some of the things needed to fake fast glossy reflections, that kind of stuff, are just ignored by Mental Ray. But this gives you everything that Mental Ray is capable of. It's a different underlying technology, and gives you just the settings that are actually there. So there's a top reflective coating, a middle layer, metallic flakes, and a base layer. And some of these work different. Definitely look at the settings in there. It has volumetric effects, very similar to the Arc & Design. Supports subsurface scattering. And if you take a look at like the wax preset or the jade preset, it does absorption at a certain distance. And here we go. Here's our thing. So these are some of the car paint materials. Diamond, silky. So a lot of people have been asking for materials that have fall off. Does a brilliant job. Frosty materials. There's the jade. Probably not the best demo for that, but it does a very nice subsurface scattering effect in the jade and gives a very jade-like effect. We use it a lot for metallic materials. So it just has a very nice metallic, the brushed feel to it. The Arc & Design works fine also, but this just steps it up quite a bit. Aluminum oxides, you can do tinted coatings on top of things. So there's actually a thin film coating right here, and you can have separate thin films on each different layer. And this distance here is in nanometers, and you can specify a color and index of refraction for those individual layers. So things that would be difficult with Arc & Design, this allows you to do. Car paint, it's unmatched, certainly. It's got the metallic flakes layer. And there's our waxy material. So definitely check that out. We'll probably have more on that as we move forward. We do want to take a few minutes and talk about some of the Kepler and benchmarking before we get into Q&A. Go back to our PowerPoint. Zip ahead there. Keep going. There we are. So we're going to pass it over to George here.
Thanks, Jenny. So some questions have come up, just so everybody knows. We will answer. I just want to kind of get through. So we're going to kind of finish up here with the hardware specs and the Kepler talk, and then we'll start answering questions as they've come in. So the first thing is the Quadro K6000, the Kepler, the big guy. So here are the specs on it, so everybody sees it. So there are 2880 cores in this thing. It's a 12 gig card, so it is double any of the current cards that are out there and double the Quadro 6000. And it is actually a little less wattage than the current Quadro 6000. And then some differences, because the question has come up, differences between GeForce versus Quadro Tesla. When we started out with Iray, we actually got GeForce GTX 580 cards that were 1.5 gigs. They were working fine, but then scenes didn't fit into them. Then we got the 3 gig cards, which helped for a while. Then we started having some problems with certain scenes that did not fit in the 3 gig cards. So as Jenny mentioned, the machine that we have now is actually a BOXX machine with a custom expander on there. So the CPU actually has 3 GPUs in it, and then the expander has 4 GPUs in the expander. So it's a 1 Quadro 6000 and 4 Tesla C2075. The reason we had to go to that is because our scenes started getting bigger and it couldn't fit in the RAM. So to kind of go through the list, RAM is obviously a big thing. If you need at least a 600 watt power supply to put a GPU in a station. With the Kepler cards, the wattages now, it doesn't, Kepler meaning the GeForce versus the Quadro Tesla combo, the wattages are less than what the Fermi cards were. And as I told the story last year, depending on the number of GPUs you get, when you go to render at full tilt, make sure you know how much power you have, because when we started out and I had a 5 GPU system, I tripped 4 people outside of my office when I started to render, because we didn't know what the circuitry wiring was or any of that. So the breaker got tripped. So here again, GeForce versus Quadro. This is always the debate. GeForce cards are cheaper. There's no qualms about it. We started out that way too. They're gaming cards. They're not meant to be run 24/7. They can be, but again, 24/7, 365, depending on the load, you have the possibility of burning out. Worst case, you spend, you have to buy a new card. They are higher clock speed, but potential to burn out, again, that 24/7, lower cost. Quadro Tesla, they are workstation server class cards, and they are meant to be run 24/7 because they go through stringent testing. They are a little slower clock speed, but you're going to see some differences here in the next couple slides. There are more memory than the GeForce cards, depending on the one. Certified performance, stability, higher cost. So here's a little list. This is the updated from last year. So the top, we've got the Kepler. The bottom, we've got the Fermi. As you can see, I did put prices on there. So the K6000 is not out yet, but the suggested retail is about, MSRP is about $5,000. A little more, a little less, but that's about the ballpark. It's supposed to be shipping roughly the end of the month, is what NVIDIA has told me. The Quadro K5000 that everybody's used to, this is another thing that we were hoping to do this webinar sooner, but this is about the earliest we can get to it with all the specs and having everything. A lot of people jumped from the Quadro 6000 to the Quadro K5000. Well, it's not an apples-to-apples comparison because the K5000 is using the smaller chip. The Quadro Q6000, its big brother in the Kepler is the K6000, which is not out yet. So Fermi cards versus Kepler. Another thing is we're doing here, we're working a lot with virtual reality and doing some things with Mosaic. So something that's good with the Kepler 5000 and 6000 is it has Quadro Sync built into it, where currently if you have a Fermi Quadro Q6000, you have to use a certified station and G-Sync cards and that kind of stuff, so that's not needed. So right, that's not an Iray specific thing, that's outside. We will talk about the Titans here, and I'm going to show that in a minute. We did buy 5 GeForce GTX Titans, $1,000 a piece. You can see the wattage actually is a little more rated. It's 25 watts more than what the K6000 will be. It does have 6 gigs of RAM, so it's double what our GTX 580s were. And it's got 2688 CUDA cores. Clock speed's 837. So again, you can see that, yes, there is a price difference, but there's also a memory difference. The thing with Iray is if your scene does not fit in the memory card, it's not going to run on the GPU. It can run on the CPU, but CPU is going to take you forever depending on the complexity of the scene.
Most scenes work with 3 gig. Most scenes work with 3 gig. We've run into a few things like the Brunswick scene, or if we have a lot of XProg plants in there where the 3 gig is just not enough. So 6 gig is about the minimum that we need for the kind of scenes that we're running these days.
So this is, we've got 2 slides here, and I want everybody to kind of see this, and hopefully this comes in well. So if people that were on the call last year, we have done benchmarking since we've been involved in Iray because of the versions of Iray with Max itself. That's one kind of comparison chart, and then the cards themselves, GTX, Quadro Tesla, now Kepler. So, and there's somewhat of a linear scale as you add more GPUs. So what we highlighted here is if you look, there's actually a drastic thing, and this is what we kind of wanted to get across, Jenny and myself, about Max 2014. If you look at the numbers here, right, Max Design 2012 with the 2 GPU system, this is using a test scene that we have. It took 8 hours and 47 minutes, okay, with Max Design 2012. That's using the GTXs. Then we used the Quadro and 4 Teslas. It went to almost 15 hours. Go to Max Design 2013 and Quadro 6, 4 Teslas, almost 23 and a half hours. Go to same exact machine, right? It increased. Go to the same exact machine, but using Max Design 2014, we're down to 5 hours and 3 minutes. So 2013 showed that it actually, there was something in there that was causing things to be slower. And now if we go over to the next one, Jenny was talking about the ARC materials, Max Design 2014, that increased by almost an hour and a half. Now the last two columns, it shows in the 2 GPU category, that's with the 5 Titans. So Max Design 2014, no ARC, 2 hours 46 minutes, so almost half than what the Quadro Tesla was. And then with the ARC, it increased. It increased.
Was double.
Yeah, it was almost double basically.
But it was still faster than that.
And then if you guys look at the 5 GPU, you can see kind of the linear piece. So if you look at the last three, right, with the Quadro Tesla, 6 hours 30 minutes versus 6 hours 30 minutes versus 4 hours. So with adding 3 more GPUs, we gained 2.5 hours. With the Titans, we went from 2 hours 46 to an hour 13. And then under the ARC, it went from 5 to an hour 51. And then you can see the very last line on the bottom. So the numbers that you're seeing in the row, they were 1920 by 1080 at 5,000 iterations. Most of our scenes we all do at 5,000. So the last column there, it shows 3840 by 2160. So double HD at the same iteration value, 4 hours 39 minutes with the Titan cards and no architectural sampler, and then 5 cards again, but with the architectural, 7 hours 31 minutes, almost a 3-hour increase.
But it's 4 times the pixels.
Right. Yeah. So it's 4 times the pixels because you've doubled it in X and Y. And this is pretty linear. This is a little bit more. So what should have been maybe, well, 8 hours, it's a little bit less. So.
And then we did another slide just so you guys can kind of see with like a bar chart basically. So kind of go from bottom up as far as old to new. So the bottom is Max Design 2012 with the GTX cards. The blue is 1 GPU, the orange is 2 GPU, and then the gray is 5. So again, huge spike in the 2013 compared to what the 2012 and 2014 was. So again, topmost you can see how the scale, what Jenny was talking about linearly, that very top one, Max Design 2014 with the architectural sampler and the Titans. And then the same thing below, just without the sampler. And then hardware specs, everybody always wonders what we're running here. So again, we have this kind of custom 7 GPU solution from BOXX. They have a new station that is out that's an 8950 that basically allows you 4 dual slot GPUs in a single station, and then it has a 1U, so you could put like a 600 or you can actually see it in the picture, 600 to 2000 to be the display driver, so it doesn't take away from anything, and your 4 cards in that could be 4 Teslas if you wanted. And then the machines that our Max team uses are the 4920 Extremes. They're an i7 overclocked, 24 gigs of RAM, and we usually have 2 GPUs in each of those stations. And so I want to thank BOXX and NVIDIA for helping to sponsor this. And we will go through some questions. And actually, one thing I did want to show, can you pull up the Ditkas? We did this last year, and I think it's a good thing to show, because a question did come up about Iray and animations. We don't do it because our scenes are so complex. And in particular, yeah. So we don't do it because our scenes are so complex, and it would take a very long time. It can be used for animating. It just depends on, again, the scene, just like anything as far as rendering or animating. So what we have done for a lot of our clients are panoramic images. So Jenny has a rig set up basically that will render basically the inside of a cube, and it renders out 6 faces, and then she has a plug-in, and when you're done, you get an HTML file that can be viewed on any device. So this is what our handover was to the Ditka's restaurant folks, so they could actually show their clients what the banquet rooms would look like. So Jenny's kind of moving slow, so it catches up on the refresh to everybody. But so this is all Iray. There was a question that came up: how long did it take to render one of the stills for Ditka's? So, and we do have a queue, I think, of questions that we've been taking. If you guys still have questions, go ahead and feed them in there while Jenny's looking this up right now.
3 hours, 5 minutes.
How many GPUs is that?
CP99, so that was the...
5. So the renderings that we showed earlier in the presentation of Ditka's, the stills, it took 3 hours, 5 minutes on the 5 Titan cards, and that was using Max 2014 at HD resolution, 5,000 iterations.
Without the architectural, it was 1 hour and 55 minutes for the sample that we did. On a little 2 GPU system, it took 8 hours, so really can't compare that one. But depending on the image and depending on the machine, 3 hours 44 on one machine. This is actually CP98 is the machine I'm on right now with the 7 GPUs, but they're the older GPUs, and that's 3 hours 44 minutes. With the newer Titans, 5 GPUs is actually faster than the 7 GPU by quite a bit. So we're very happy with the Titans, double the speed. So if you switch to Max 2014, you double your speed, and then if you switch over to Titan, you double your speed again. So we're doing in a much shorter amount of time the images that we need to do.
Okay, we're going to go ahead and start looking at the questions. Brian's going to help read them off here to us.
Okay, what post-processing do you use with your scenes?
So the question is, what post-processing do we do with our scenes? Very minimal, actually. We'll use Lightroom to make some adjustments, brighten or darken. Photoshop, it really depends. But really there's not a lot that we do out of it. It is a push-button photography kind of solution, and as long as we've got our light set up and our exposure control set up correctly, what we see is what we get and what we need. So other than just minimal post-processing, that's about it.
Okay, the next question, are you aware that the camera correction modifier does not work with Caustic solver? How do you get around that?
Yeah. Am I aware that the camera correction modifier does not work with caustics, and how do you get around that? I am aware of that. I know NVIDIA is aware of that, and I do not know of a way to get around that other than just turning off caustics. So it's unfortunate, but this is all quite an evolution over time, and the fact that caustics are there at all is a bonus, and not everything is always taken into account or able to get done technically by the time things ship. So at least we have caustics. It's not perfect yet, but they're working on it.
Okay, can I net render and farm from 3D back in Iray?
Can you net render using Iray? Certainly. As far as Backburner is concerned, it's just like any other render. So we just run server on the machines, and away it goes. So machines pick it up and do that. There is no distributed rendering, though, at least at this point. So you cannot utilize GPUs that are on another machine. You do have some options there, certainly with an animation that's easy enough for other machines to pick it up. When we do our panoramas, rather than using the 3D Studio Max panorama tool, we set up a camera that has a 90-degree field of view, and it's animated over 6 frames just to look in each of the different front, left, right directions. This gives us 2 things. One, we can distribute it over multiple machines because it's rendering an animation instead of a single image. And 2, we can do much higher resolutions than the panorama tool normally allows you to do. So most of the panoramas will do a 2K by 2K image per panel. So, and then use a program called Pano2VR to stitch those together. So Piano to VR. So it's like a $70 program, and works very well and produces a number of different formats: HTML5, Flash, QuickTime, MLB, whatever you need.
Okay, this is a timeless question. Do you see the additional cost of computers or GPUs correlate to an increase in profits?
Is there a correlation between increase in profit and increase in hardware? Is that the question? Yeah, with the GPUs. George hinted at it a bit earlier, and we keep going back to that kitchen scene. That was our very first Iray project, and trying to render that in Mental Ray, it was blotchy, and we had to turn off a lot of features that kind of made it look nice and looked like a photo. So we bit the bullet and went with with Iray, even though we didn't really have the GPUs to support it at the time. Client loved it. Client is in love with the look and feel of what we give them in Iray. They prefer that, and it's gotten us a lot more business because of it. We've then gone and shown this to other clients at the architecture firm and potential clients outside, and they love it. It looks real. They can't tell the difference between it and a photograph, and they want it. So is it tangible dollar-wise? No, but it is getting our business more business.
Does Iray support render to texture?
Iray does not support render to texture. Excellent question. There are a few disadvantages, I guess, with Iray. That's one of them. I mentioned the lack of render elements. Even if you save out to any XR file, it's not going to do G buffers or anything like that. So. Any other questions? At what point do we use cloud rendering versus in-house rendering? At the moment, there's no cloud rendering that's specifically Iray. There's some things on the horizon. There's actually some third-party things coming out for other applications that we're keeping our eye out on. But there's no way to just send out an Iray job to another company at this point that we're aware of.
Panorama option work with Iray. What is the QTVR program?
Yeah, the question was about the panoramas again. So Garden Gnome software is what we use. It's a standard camera, so that should work in Mental Ray or Iray or whatever your rendering is, and it's just an animated camera, 90-degree field of view to create the individual images required for the panorama.
Can you import Revit into Max?
Most of our scenes, the question is, can we go Revit to Max to Iray? And most of the projects we do all start out in Revit. So if a client comes to us with a set of 2D plans, we're not going to build it in Max. We're going to build it in Revit because it's a much more efficient tool, and we have it. Just like with Mental Ray, you do a file link, comes in with Autodesk materials on everything. Those render perfectly fine in Iray. Nice thing about Iray is that Iray doesn't care about the number of lights. So like the Brunswick, almost 2,000 individual photometric area lights in that project. Our workflow is generally to replace the lights that come in with from Revit with Max lights. And the only reason for that is we can instance and control and do some different things with that and keep it independent of Revit, but generally if the geometry looks right and the materials look right, then what comes out of Revit works perfectly fine in Iray.
There was a question that came in about
Rhino 3D.
Rhino 3D and launching it. Again, we're not with NVIDIA. NVIDIA just kind of helped us along with BOXX sponsoring this. So that question would have to be, pushed over to the site that Jenny said, the Iray forums, and you can ask the NVIDIA guys about their support for Rhino and Iray. Next question.
Where do you set the file for the IBL and mental ray?
So the question is, where do you set the file for the IBL and mental ray? It's just the normal environment bitmap. So there's nothing special with that. It's just right there with the environment. So image-based lighting. And it is a final gather effect, so your results may vary, but my testing so far, it does a nice job. The problem with image-based lighting, pretty much everything in Iray is image-based lighting, but the problem with image-based lighting is it often doesn't have the shadow details you often need. So you need to put some lights in there if you need some specific shadows. But my experimentation with that so far, it works pretty well.
The next question was how do you know how much memory per scene? So you have an idea before you can work on the GPU.
So the question is, how do you know how much memory is available or is being used per scene? A couple ways. Close that thing. So if you've got the Quadro Teslas, you can right-click, go to NVIDIA Control Panel, and manage Maximus settings, and click on that, and it opens up a little GPU meter. If it doesn't fit, the GPU is not going to run, so you'll see this be at 0%. So that's one way to feedback. If you go to render message window, turn on your information, you should see it here too that a particular GPU doesn't have enough memory, and then other statistics related to what's being sent to Iray. And then normal Windows meters too can show you how much is being used, and that's generally where we'll look just to see. Because there's other things in addition to just polygon count. There's textures that go into that and other computational overhead. So it's not just a pure polygon count kind of thing.
Another question came in about somebody using mental ray versus Iray and what kind of machine would they get from the BOXX side. A 4920 similar to what we have because it's an i7 6-core Extreme, so it's overclocked. So you're getting 6 cores, 12 threads. And then as far as the video card, it depends on what other things you're doing. Outside of Max, or you're doing Photoshop, anything that's requiring video memory. So you don't have to spend a ton of money, but without knowing more, it's kind of hard to say. But it could be a $200 card to like a $600 card is all you need for that. If you need more, then that's it's different. If you're using active shade or not active shade, nitrous inside of Max, that's going to eat GPU. That'll eat memory on the video card. Latest Photoshop uses GPU as well, so it just depends on your applications.
Are mental ray production shaders on plans?
Are the mental ray production shaders on the plans for Iray? Not that they've told me, but they're not going to tell me. And if they did tell me, I couldn't tell you, because usually they are working on things in the background. George and I have been involved with Autodesk betas for many, many years, and certainly have been through this where things have been proposed or on the books and they don't hit that spring deadline for the program. So we tend to not talk about what is on the horizon. The Iray developer blog, usually once a feature becomes available in Iray, that's the OEM version of Iray. They talk about slice planes and other things that work. You'd have to go to BunksPeed or one of the other third-party programs to get those kinds of features. Autodesk is not always the most progressive in that respect. There are, if you're looking for Iray and Maya, there's a company called 0x1 that is working on a plugin, and I don't know if that's in beta yet. Lightworks is coming out with an Iray Plus software development kit, so you may see Iray coming into a lot of other applications where it wasn't available before. There's a company called M4D that's working on a Cinema 4D plugin. And then, of course, BOXX, so I had that. Has a lot of features that aren't available in you know, the production version of Iray.
So the question asked the question, but is there a way to tell from your current? Is there a way to tell from your current scene how big, is there a way to tell? Not the GPU memory, but can you tell from your current scene if it's going to fit into the available memory of your graphics card without rendering it?
Is there a way to tell if it's going to fit? Some of that's just the experience, I think, and hard to say. Again, there's a lot of things that factor into that. So textures, polygon count. Let's take a look here. In doing the Brunswick, they had a lot of things that came in from solid modeling project program rather, and that shot the polygon count up quite a bit. Plus, it was 40 different lanes of furniture and equipment, and it did not fit at all in the 3 GB cards, and that was probably the biggest scene that we've had so far. Uncompressed max file, 725 megabytes, not including additional external references. So like all the furniture and stuff was in other reference files. So it might be a gigabyte of uncompressed max data that makes that up. Fits in the 6 GB card. It does not fit in the 3 GB card, and I don't know offhand where that one's at. Go ahead.
So the next question is, have you tried Iray on older systems that are strictly CPU powered, and can these systems be useful used as distributed renders?
Can Iray be used on older systems and CPU only as part of distributed rendering? Iray itself does not utilize distributed rendering, so there's no functionality in there to connect to the other computers as there is in Mental Ray. So I would say no. It could be something on the horizon, but in this current version, there's nothing that allows that. And CPU rendering works fine. It's fairly efficient. It's not going to be nearly as good as with GPU, but if you compare it to programs that don't utilize GPU rendering like Maxwell, you're going to have a much faster, quicker result using Iray compared to something that's CPU only.
Okay, next question is, how is the quality for skin and cloth for characters?
Skin and cloth for characters was the question. What is the quality? You may want to look at the new Iray material and take a look at the subsurface scattering for the skin. That's usually the biggest factor in there, is getting the right look and feel. As far as cloth, again, you got translucency, transparency. It supports cutouts. Whatever you might need in that material, does a very, very nice job.
Okay, so a question came in relating to the GTX, and so this is kind of, again, something I wanted to talk about. Everybody's not quite understanding the difference between the size of the cards and the nomenclature, and we've discussed this with NVIDIA, but the 580, the best way I could equate it is the GTX 580's big brother is really the Titan. The question came in specifically about the 780 and how online people are saying it's a performance. that it's slower than the 580, and that is true. It is a slower card because it's not the same type of chip. Just because it's a higher model number does not mean that it's the same. So again, the 580 to me, the big brother in the Kepler series would be the Titan. So you would see vast improvement on that, but it's also more expensive, where the 580 3 gig was maybe 400.
Well, initially it was about 7.
Initially, it was about 700 when it came out for the 3 gig, where right now the Titan with the 6 gigs and 2,600 something cores is $1,000. Again, try to be, you have to kind of look between things, and if you guys have questions, here's our email, but there's not an apple to apple. Just going from a 500 to 600, 700 doesn't mean it's better performance. Just like the Kepler 5000 versus a Quadro Fermi 6000, it's apples and oranges. They're not the same. Different size chip in there. Even though there's more CUDA cores, it just depends on things. Next question.
Also, something before we move forward, with the Titan cards, those are not supported in MAX 2013. So we had some issues with that. It may be supported in the future, but as of this moment, you need 2014 to run that card.
Do you know if Iray supports true normal maps, not height maps? Normal maps are common in my industry more than height or bump maps.
Height or bump map, so an actual normal map. I have not actually tried normal maps in Iray. I don't know the answer to that offhand.
If you guys want to email that, whoever asked that question, if you want to email to myself or Jenny, we can try to get you in touch with somebody from NVIDIA, or we'll get the answer for you. And we're going to go about 2 minutes longer, and then we're going to be ending the session.
What about the memory using the multi-card systems? Is there any planned possibility to use all cards memory together one day?
So the question is whether there'll be the possibility in the future that if you have multiple GPUs using, let's say, SLI, whether it would be able to utilize all the memory across all the cards. Currently, the way it works is that if you've got a 3 gig card, a 2 gig card, the scene needs to fit into both cards individually. It's not going to look at it as 5 gigabytes. It's going to look at it separately as a 2 gig and separately as a 3 gig card. And one might work and one might not work. It will just fail on the one smaller device and then render on the larger device as long as it fits into that. I'm unaware of any plans to make that possible in the future. So right now you need to have a card with enough memory for each card. And the way it works too, I'm not sure how shared memory would function with that, but you never know.
And one thing before, in case people, the big thing too that Jenny brought up with the earlier with the Maximus technology. Maximus is what NVIDIA's termed as far as having a driver display card. So a Quadro Kepler card is your display port, and then the Maximus comes into play when you have a Tesla card that has no display ports. So if you just had, if this machine had 7 Quadro 6000s, we wouldn't see that graph that she showed you. The Tesla is what enables that. Next question?
Last question.
Last question.
Okay. Is there a difference in performance using material glossy settings, i.e. less glossy, more glossy means fast or slow?
So the question was whether adding glossiness to a surface impacts the performance of the rendering, and it certainly does with Mental Ray. A big focus of my book was optimizing materials, lighting, settings to try to just improve performance and speed. With Iray, we don't really worry about it. So we make the material look the way that it needs to, and go from there. In the past, we've had to go and with the Arc and Design material, if we bring that up, you've got your highlights and final gather over only settings, your fast interpolate. Iray ignores that. So reflections are reflections. I haven't done any specific benchmarks with regards to with and without, simply because it has not been an issue. But maybe I'll look at that for the Autodesk University presentation, which should be available online at some point after AU. So if you're not going to AU, you know, we'll certainly maybe put out a little notice on that when that happens.
We'll do one more.
One more question.
Your memory use value in the render process window after it has determined scenes fit into a video card memory.
Which setting?
Memory use value in render progress window accurate.
When you click render and it's chugging away. Oops, I had too many windows open here, sorry. So, yeah, I'm not sure that equates to what's going on inside of the GPU. Hang on. Older version of the scene, so. So scene statistics, I think, refers to what's internal to Max and not what's going on in the scene. But whether that can be equated to what is required in the GPU, it may be. This is 4.9 gig, and this particular scene did not fit in a 3 gig card, so that's possible. I'm not sure how long this one will take to pre-process. It might be a little while. Revit scenes tend to take their time with pre-processing, with a lot of nested multi-sub-object materials. So it's possible, but I don't know specifically. I haven't looked at that. It's a good question, though.
Okay, and on that note, we're going to call it a day for the webinar here. I want to thank again BOXX and NVIDIA for helping us put the webinar on. We hope you guys found it useful. And again, check the BOXX site. We're hoping in about a week or so, roughly, we will have this online. So it has been recorded. We just got to go through it and make sure everything came out audio and video-wise. And again, if you have any questions, my email's up there, Jenny's email, and then if you have any BOXX-specific question, Brian's email is up there as well. And hopefully we'll be doing another one of these. And any questions, just let us know.